live. Give people a second. All right, come on in, everybody. Welcome back to the Holler. Justin with the Holler here. TNHoller.com is where you can find us, at the TN Holler on Twitter and Facebook. We also have hollers across the state. Thanks to all of your support. Deeply, deeply appreciate it. And always, we want to send a special shout out to Elisa Parker for her support. If you're buying or selling in Middle Tennessee, go through her. That's the way to help us. We're here today with a special guest who is coming off a brand new announcement. Really appreciate that you're willing to join us here. Rep Cooper, how are you?
Doing fine, Justin. Always good to talk to you and the good folks at the Holler.
We appreciate that you make the time. I guess let's just jump right into it. Obviously, last night there was a vote to pass these, what we're calling racially gerrymandered Republican maps that carve up Nashville into three pieces. Doesn't seem to be a coincidence that you're making this announcement the next day. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, the legislature is 100% of the reason I'm not running for re-election, because their gerrymandering not only hurts the racial minorities in Nashville, it hurts everybody in Nashville. Nashville, our capital city, has been a proud place, a political capital for 230 years. But now the power is being transferred to Clarksville, Cookeville, and places like Columbia.
How much thought did you give to running anyway?
Oh, I was clearly intending to run. I've raised $1.2 million in funds, far more than any other candidate in Tennessee. I was ready to go with any sort of decent map. But look at it. You know, you can't even describe the salamander gerrymander that they did to the different Nashville folks. And it's cruel. It's intentional. John Ryder, the Republican guru, is quoted in the Tennessee Journal, is basically saying, hide your tracks, no text, no emails, because they knew they were doing dirty work. They just didn't want a court case filed that could overturn it.
Right. And so when you saw the map, did you give any thought to just like going for it? And
oh, yeah, I studied it carefully.
Yeah.
See, I've represented 30 of Tennessee's 95 rural counties. I know country folks. I was raised in Shelbyville, Tennessee. And these are wonderful people. But at least in the current era, it is very difficult for anybody from Nashville, anybody with a D after their name, to have much credibility. One day that will change, but we're a long way from the days when we had a competitive two-party system in Tennessee.
So I don't have the clip here to pull up, but I just want to point out the things that are being said by the Republicans. First of all, last night, Harold Love said it'll diminish the influence of African-American voters. Then there was also Senator Brenda Gilmore, who stood up and said the maps hurt her and that it was an attack on black voters. Rep Mitchell stood up and said, let's keep a straight face when you say that there's no political consideration in drawing that map. But the comebacks from Senator Johnson and Pat Marsh were, oh no, now they're going to have 3 congressmen representing Nashville. When you hear them say that, almost as though they're doing it for Nashville, what do you think?
Well, if you look at the powerful people in the legislature, and they're really running our state now, Governor Lee will automatically sign whatever they give him. Randy McNally, the lieutenant governor, isn't chopping up his county 3 ways. Cameron Sexton, the Speaker of the House, isn't chopping up his county 3 ways. That's they're being insincere at best when they make that argument.
I think that's fair to say. The Tennessee Democratic Party has come out and said they're prepping a lawsuit. It was party line vote. There have been other lawsuits. There was, I think, just a successful one in Alabama. Do you have any sense of the chances of success of a lawsuit?
Well, I fully support litigation. I've been talking to every lawyer I can find. None of them have made a persuasive case to me so far, because under the Voting Rights Act and laws like that, we're not like Memphis. We're different. And it's harder to bring a case in our area than in Memphis. So we got a lot of work to do. And I'm afraid the old-fashioned work of winning rural counties in Tennessee is the primary job, and many Tennessee Democrats are not interested in doing that. That's a shame, because that's really where democracy starts, at the grassroots level. You have to be competitive in every county in Tennessee.
Right. And so, I mean, clearly there are going to be people who are still going to run for this as Democrats. I'm actually in the new Tennessee 5th district. There are already, I think, a handful of Republicans who have committed or at least expressed interest in running. What would your advice be for a Democrat who's going to step in this race and, take this on?
Well, Justin, as a previous congressional candidate, it's hard, especially if you're not born and raised in Tennessee. So it takes a lot of name recognition. It takes a lot of trust. Oftentimes it takes a lot of money to run a campaign. And all those things are hard to come by. It also takes a willingness to live in the national media environment, because that's increasingly poisonous.
Oh, we lost him. We were having some technical difficulty before. That's why we were a few minutes late. So hopefully we'll get him back here in a second, or he'll sign back in. I just want to point to a couple of reactions throughout the state as this announcement has been made. This is his brother, the mayor of Nashville, saying it's a loss for Nashville and Washington. Jim is a leader with deep expertise and a great heart. Here he comes back. Jim, I was just pointing out this tweet from your brother about your announcement, saying it's a loss for Nashville and Washington, and that a leader with deep expertise and a great heart will be missed. A lot of people are coming out and thanking you for your service. Remind me, I know I should have had this before we came on here. How many years have you been in there?
32 years overall, and that's in 2 different districts. So I'm the 3rd longest serving congressman in Tennessee history.
That's amazing. And have you put any thought into what it's going to be like to not be Congressman Jim Cooper anymore? I mean, you've certainly been Congressman. It's basically been your first name as long as most people have known you.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. It's free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, and free at last.
I guess that's one way of looking at it. You're part of a sort of a rash of retirements here. You're the 29th Democrat to announce you're not running for re-election because of an upward climb to keep control of the House. Do you have any thoughts about what Democrats are facing in 2022 nationally? And is there any hope for Democrats to retain the House?
Well, if history is any guide, it's against us. And the Biden administration needs to boost its popularity. But remember, I'm a blue dog Democrat, and I get along with people of goodwill in the other party. Now, I reject Trumpism, and sadly, that's taken over the Republican Party, but one day they'll return to their senses. It's important to listen to good ideas, whatever their source. And Democrats aren't perfect. We're not always right. Oftentimes, Republicans have good ideas, and it's important to talk with them on an equal basis and listen to what they have to say. Because without mutual respect, there's going to be no respect at all. And as I say, Trump folks are outliers, but regular Republicans aren't bad folks. Independents are great folks. We just need to talk about the issues, figure out the best solution, and that's the way we all move ahead.
It sounds like you think there's hope for democracy. I must admit, I am very nervous about where things are going. We've seen things like reports of Trump trying to seize those voting machines. There was a voicemail from a Trump aide to state reps about sending, other electors that Rachel Maddow played the other day. And then ever since the election, they've been steadily replacing a lot of election workers. So I would ask, how is your sense of where democracy stands right now? How much peril are we really in? And, do you have any fear that elections won't matter soon?
We are in peril if Democrats give up and stop working at the grassroots level and stop voting. It's a 2-party system, and we can't let them win by default, which oftentimes we've been doing. It's a struggle, and there are darker chapters in American history. If you look at Joe Greenspan's new book, The Age of Acrimony, it points out how the 50 years after the Civil War, there was a congressman murdered every 7 years. 3 presidents were assassinated. And guess what? Voter turnout was at all-time highs. Then the progressive era came, and we cleaned up a lot of the government mess. People were not assassinated as much. And guess what? Voter turnout plummeted. So we've got a lot of work to do to not sink to the levels of the post-Civil War era, but it's going to take everybody working. And that can start at home through civic club participation, church participation, reaching out to friends and neighbors, just being neighborly. That shouldn't be hard. And it's important to have different ideas, different discussions. You mentioned Lisa Donovan Parker. I'm one of her biggest fans.
Uh-oh. I'm hoping we'll get one more shot at bringing him in here because I have two more questions that I wanted to ask him, and I was hoping to get in towards the end. So, Jim, if you're out there, come back. I see you guys are posting. I see a lot of your comments. I think some people are wishing that he would run anyway, which is understandable. I think a lot of people are expressing their appreciation for 32 years. 32 years is a long time. So, I mean, he's been in politics and serving the community for a really long time. So 32 years. I see people talking about term limits. Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to talk about. Definitely hard to make a case against some form of term limits. I'd be curious what he thinks about that. My questions for him, if he comes back, we're going to be, what is he going to do next? Is there anything else that he would think about running for? And then also, I'd love to know if he's going to be willing to help whoever does run for this seat as a Democrat. Obviously, a lot of institutional knowledge, a lot of name value, a lot of recognition, and definitely seems like whoever ends up as the nominee would be well served to have help of Jim Cooper. Carlos, our friend, is asking correctly that this area will now have 3 reps instead of just 1. That depends how you look at it. It will be carved into 3 pieces. So 3 different districts will have a piece of Nashville, but chances are the people who represent those districts won't be living in Nashville. And because of the way they'll be carved up, Nashville itself will have a much smaller level of influence on that representative. And, the way the numbers look, it looks like there will be 3 Republicans. So a state that has 40% Democrats will have 1 of 9 congressmen, and a city that has, I think, 41% African-American voters or minority voters, one of those 2, will now not have a Democratic representative. So, even though Republicans are saying that this was done in a nonpartisan way, we all know that that's not true. I see somebody asking, don't Democrats do this also? The answer is absolutely yes. And it's just as bad when Democrats do it. So I don't think there's any good faith. And this is another question that I'd love to ask him if he comes back. If he doesn't, I understand internet can be a rough place sometimes, but my question would be, do you think there's a good faith argument against independent, nonpartisan committees drawing these maps rather than partisan legislators drawing these maps? Red or blue? This is something we should all be able to agree on, because when representatives pick voters rather than voters picking representatives, you end up with representatives who are entrenched, who don't have to be answerable to the people. And that's when a lot of bad things happen both ways. Not talking about Democrat or Republican. It just so happens we're a Republican supermajority here. So it's Republicans who do this stuff here, but not everywhere. This is Senator Brenda Gilmore last night talking about the new maps.
It actually hurts me as an African American because I think it undermines the equal protection of Black voters in ways that we have not seen in decades.
Davidson County, Nashville will have 3 United States congressmen. You may not see that as a benefit, and I respect your opinion, but I think that clearly it is.
In every single instance of this new map that is before us, Black voters will not have the opportunity to vote for their candidate of choice. Again, I am hurt personally by the map that is being presented by my colleagues. Although I respect them greatly in many ways, I would just say that it's unfair to African American voters in the state of Tennessee.
So that's Senator Brenda Gilmore expressing how she feels to see the city carved up in this way, clearly in a way to limit and silence minority voices, Black voices, and she's not alone in thinking that. State Representative Harold Love said something similar when he said that it was to diminish the African American voice. So, this is clearly what's happening. And yeah, when you have a Republican Party that's almost entirely white, and minority voters are voting the other way, partisan gerrymandering and racial gerrymandering start to get pretty close to, or become very similar when your party's all white. So, and there's a lot of running themes here throughout this. And so here we are the day after, and Rep. Cooper has decided that it's the end of the road for him. I don't know what he's going to do next. I don't know who else is going to run in his place, but there will be lawsuits. This isn't over. And, I'd be curious to hear what you guys think. I appreciate you guys tuning in as always. Jennifer says, John Rose of TN6 can't even find his way off the farm, much less to Nashville. Yeah, so it's going to be John Rose is going to represent East Nashville. Mark Green, my old buddy who beat me, is going to represent, I think, North Nashville. And I believe that Odessa Kelly will be running against him. So we'll get her on here to hear her thoughts. She is still running and has been vocal about these maps and what they're doing to the black vote. But you can bet your bottom dollar I will be shocked if either of those guys go anywhere near Nashville for town halls, that kind of thing. And, Mark Green doesn't really do those. Marsha Blackburn didn't do them when she was our representative, hasn't done one in 5 years, even as a senator. So what you end up having is people in these safe districts, less safe because you're putting Nashville in there, but safe districts that don't have to talk to these communities, don't have to listen to their concerns, who voted against COVID relief, who voted to overturn the election that was in large part the insurrection happened because of what went down in 6 states where, in large part the black vote helped decide that election. So you have now basically insurrectionist legislators, representatives representing these largely black communities in Nashville who definitely won't go anywhere near them. And so to say, oh, we have 3 representatives now in Nashville rather than 1, that is highly disingenuous, as the congressman said. And Senator Jack Johnson is frankly full of shit when he says that, and so is Pat Marsh. But we appreciate Jim Cooper coming on here. Always appreciate you guys following along. A couple other things I just wanted to mention while we're on here. One is obviously this Steve Ducey thing. Oh, not Steve Ducey. Is it Steve Ducey? Peter Ducey was the reporter who Biden called a stupid son of a bitch. I won't play the video. I'm sure you guys have seen that already. But we did have Marsha Blackburn jump on and say, oh, he's attacking a free and fair press, as though she's upset about that. Looking forward to the outrage from Maddow. And, then Jim Banks, or not Jim, that's Jim Cooper. Jim Banks said, have we ever seen a president attack and malign the free press like Biden has? I mean, how stupid do Republicans think we are? That they think we've just forgotten all the stuff that Trump did when he was in office, like, for instance, tweets like this: the rigged and corrupt media is the enemy of the people. What puts reporters in danger more? Calling one a stupid son of a bitch when he asks, frankly, a stupid question, or tweeting shit like this, which actually led to, there was a guy who had a list of people he was going to send bombs to, and media members were on that and incited an insurrection. I mean, Marsha and Banks are completely full of shit for that. And so I just wanted to make sure to say that out loud. Let's see what else you guys are saying. They voted against infrastructure also. Yes, they did. How much of a power grab did they need in the state? How was 7-2 not good enough for them? Personally, I didn't see any threat to the 7 flipping blue. That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's just completely political gerrymandering. And the thing to remember is that the House of Representatives is fairly close. It's going to be close. So this seat that they're taking in Tennessee may end up factoring into who has the gavel after this year, which, could be a big deal. Although, as long as President Manchin and Sinema are still around, who knows what could really happen with getting legislation passed anyway with the filibuster in place, but certainly not going to be any better to have Republicans in charge of the House of Representatives, especially with things like the January 6th committee going on. So, this seat that they're taking in Tennessee could end up being a big factor in national power. So again, Rep. Cooper not running again. I see a lot of disappointment with people who are disappointed that he's not going to run. A lot of people are appreciative of the work he has done. I understand both those things. I would say 32 years is a long time. I would say, I don't want people to feel discouraged. Like, look, you're listening to somebody who ran for Congress in a district that was, a steeper climb than that. So I'm a big believer that we need to run for things anyway. So, I want people to jump in, and I'm not saying that, look, people have their lives, people have to do what they have to do. Jim Cooper's been in there for 32 years. That's a long time. But somebody needs to run for this seat. It's going to be a steep climb for sure, but there's part of Nashville in there. Part of Williamson County's in there. That's where I live. And, that's changing also. So, people need to keep running for these things. And even though it may seem like the odds are long, you have to keep running. You have to keep fighting. And so I look forward to seeing who steps up. The Republican side of this race is very clearly going to be a race to the bottom. It's going to be who can be more extreme, who can be more against, who can be more pro-COVID. It'll be pro-COVID. It'll be anti-democracy. It'll be stop the steal. You're not going to be able to say that the election wasn't stolen. You have to say the election was stolen. You have to say that no COVID mitigation efforts are okay with you, that you maybe even say it was a hoax, like Andy Ogles, who has talked about running for this seat. And I tried to talk to him about that when he was at the legislature this week, and he didn't want to talk to me for some strange reason. It's going to be a race to the bottom. And it'll be interesting to see what happens on the Republican side of this. But there will be an opportunity for a Democratic candidate in this race to at least look like the sane one. I don't know if that means there'll be a debate. They generally don't like to debate. I would encourage fellow members of the media to please pressure them to have a debate, invite them to a debate, not just assume they won't debate and refuse to even go down that road, because Mark Green didn't debate me. He ducked me. And, I know that a lot of times they think, oh, they have more to lose than to gain from a debate, but who really loses when you don't debate is the people. And that shouldn't be a partisan issue. Everybody should be willing to debate when you're running for a seat, even if you're the incumbent, Democrat or Republican. So these are things that hopefully we can agree on. I know I have some Republicans on here that don't agree with me about a lot of stuff, but hopefully we can agree on that stuff. I'm trying to see some of the things you guys are saying. Sooner or later, people are going to get tired of Republicans. Andy has wanted to be in Congress for 20 years. I think they're at least even odds he'll run. Yes, that seems likely. Although, he's talked about running for governor also, and he certainly took some swipes at Governor Lee during COVID. Anyway, these are all things that we will keep an eye on, that will get ironed out. And if you are Holler followers, make sure to subscribe at tnholler.com and follow us across the social media platforms. Follow all the Hollers throughout the state. We always appreciate the support. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.